It's another Wednesday, which means we're not playing politics. I'm Alexander Keaton. As always, got my Rio Nick Bradshaw. Nick, how you doing?
I'm great, buddy. How you doing?
Cannot complain. Not that it would matter anyway. People don't listen. No. So we're going to do lightning round today. Just sort of because there's so much. It's one of those things. There's so much to talk about. You sort of get paralyzed. So we're going to do lightning quick rounds about some things that are going on. Maybe we'll find a theme within some of them. Nick, I'll let you kick off. What's forefront in your mind?
There's been a couple things. For me, what's been interesting to see has been kind of the twofold. Obviously, the shooting that took place recently with the gentleman who was appearing to resist at some point, and the young officer, or the officer, drew what weapon she thought was her stun gun, and unfortunately drew her pistol. You're seeing that case now in very rapid succession. I mean, she's already resigned. She's been charged with manslaughter. You're seeing that kind of happen, and I'm not reducing. I'm not minimizing. It's a tragic case. Look, when you are in possession of a firearm, the first thing you cannot deny is that firearm is your responsibility. We can't be true to the argument of gun safety and gun rights if you don't hold to the standard when it's a situation that's especially when the situation is tragic like this. But I think on the flip side of that, when you're seeing the manner with which every action has an equal and opposite reaction, so you look at across again the old familiar places, Minneapolis, which surprises when you think about it, Minnesota, but Oregon, Washington, places in California. I mean, you're seeing that anti-cop sentiment grow and be pushed back. It's really a tragic situation all around. I don't believe this woman had a single intent whatsoever. I just don't believe that. She may have been in a situation that we've asked her to be a part of as a police officer to step into, and she may have made an accident with withdrawing the wrong weapon. That needs to come out in the facts, and I'm going to wait for those facts to come out. But it just seems like, again, this is something that has to be discussed and approached, and it cannot be simply reduced to this is a racially charged killing. And you're going to hear facts on both sides. You're going to hear this guy had an abusive past, evidently. We'll see, or charges relating to some scary stuff. Let's leave it at that, because the facts need to come out. We don't need to be judge, jury, and executioner in the first 10 minutes. We need to have the patience and the temperance to resolve the situation thoroughly and accurately and better understand what's going on.
Yeah. Just real quick, in many ways, this sort of reminds me of the Amber Geiger case that happened here a couple of years ago. The point that I always made was you are ultimately responsible for what you shoot. She, with Amber Geiger, it's, while we waited for the facts to come out, all that mattered was she shot someone. That matters. Now, everything else is not irrelevant, but it leads to whether or not it's murder or manslaughter or criminally negligent homicide. I would argue she, with Amber Geiger. Now, the reason it wasn't criminally negligent homicide was because of how the law is written. But the simple fact of the matter is, if you're a 2A person, you have to preach responsibility. She was in a situation. Was it hectic? Yes. And she. Okay. Wow. I don't know what you're doing over there, and frankly, I'm a little worried. But it's with the difference was this officer was on duty. She knew where she was. She just simply pulled the wrong weapon. Now, again, does that mean that she should? That, oh, okay, we'll just say it's clear that this was an accident, and no, because she's responsible. She pulled a gun instead of a taser. Now, this does beg the question. It's like, well, hold on. I mean, tasers they feel like guns. In the heat of an emergency, pulling a taser instead of a gun seems very reasonable. And what I mean by that is mistaking one for the other. Now, does it make her less responsible? No. It's her obligation to know that she's got the gun or the taser. And it's her responsibility to know what happens. So no matter what this is, this can't be anything less than manslaughter, because she had an obligation to use the right force. But I think a valid question would be, do we need to think about redesigning tasers so this doesn't happen again? Because right now what you've got is a weapon that isn't a gun, but doesn't tell you necessarily it's not a gun, except for its color, right? If you're in a intense situation, like this was, there's nothing really to sort of tell your body, hey, you're holding a gun, not a taser, or you're holding a taser and not a gun. So that may be a conversation to have in the future. Unfortunately, it doesn't really change this situation. And really, whatever this guy has done, ultimately also is sort of irrelevant, except to say why she would be in a heightened state of concern about this individual. This isn't just some guy. Contrary to what everyone's told us, this was not just some random dude who just happened to have an air freshener hanging from his window. That's not what this was about. He did there was enough out on him for as far as warrants go for them to say, hey, this is someone we need to pay attention to. The problem is she did use an inappropriate amount of force, and it's clear from the video she did not expect that to be a gun. That's sort of the thing. It's obvious from the video that that's what's happened. Now, like you said, we need to let everything go through its paces, but the bigger problem here is immediately it just fed him narrative, and facts be damned.
Well,
it's the narrative that matters. That matters to the media and the people who are picking up a couple of flat screens.
Well, and the thing is, excuse me, Alex, but the thing is also, when you look at it, again, when you've got the major media outlets like ABC, CBS, NBC, they ignore Rashida Tlaib's comments on no more policing and no more incarceration because they want to follow this Daunte Wright's death. Look, this is a tragic situation, but we need to understand where a lot of these things are also coming from. And when you've got highly radicalized, and I want to use the full gravity and weight of that word, not just things to be turned around like, oh, these radical Democrats. No, I mean full-blown radicalism. We're talking about Mickey Mouse cartoon topics now. Where in the world do you think that could play? No more policing. I mean, the level of, the only thing that surpasses the ignorance is the arrogance that someone would think. And here's the really cynical part. I don't think she thinks that.
Oh, I guarantee you she doesn't. She knows here's the problem. She knows she can get away with it.
And
she knows no one's going to call her on the carpet for this.
And that's where I have the real problem. You get what you tolerate. And I think in this situation, the level of treating people that they think, I'm sorry, we said about it in pre-production. I do not believe that this country is 50-50 on the verge. I really don't. You want to talk about defunding the police? I think the media has provided a lens that these wildly radical personalities are being able to chew up a lot of airtime. And they chew up airtime and give you the perspective that this is some massively popular belief. I don't think that it is. I think it's ridiculous. I think what it does, though, is that it bends the pendulum back so people can say, well, no, I don't want to defund the police, but we really need to start understanding about how we can change and grow this. Again, most people, I don't think, even use the terminology correctly when they say something like institutional racism. I think what they're trying to say is they see cases of racist behavior and not apply what the term for something to actually be systemically racist or built in to the mechanism. Again, I'm not saying this flippantly. I'm saying it directly. I'm asking directly. Can anyone provide an example of an institutionally racist, governed by doctrine, supported by law institution in this country?
I mean, you can make the argument that the Democrat Party is, but that's
No,
me
but
being
I'm saying from the concept of, is there a job hiring process? Is there
so here's the problem. The people who would use that phrase will argue that you misunderstand the phrase. See, the problem is that this goes back to this is a religion. This, along with many other things on the left, is a religious belief. It is. Hold on. Uh, Black people have a higher percentage of people under, who are living in poverty than white people. Clearly, that's evidence of systemic racism, because because it's this belief that everything should be equal and everything should be even. If
well,
just to pick a number, if 30% of white people were to live below the poverty line, it's more than that. But let's say that, just to pick random numbers, then we should see it with the black community. Everything should be proportional compared with everything else. And the problem is, it's an unrealistic expectation. The whole point is the phrase systemic racism is designed to be the God of the gaps argument. It isn't the okay. Well, why? There is no intent to actually understand the question. It's to have an answer that actually absolves an entire group of responsibility, because because you want to remove actual individual responsibility. That's what this is all about. It can't be, hey, guess what? Maybe you don't fight against the cops. Maybe you actually allow yourself to be arrested, and if you think it's unjust, you fight it in the courts later. The problem is it is a phrase that is designed to absolve someone of individual responsibility for their own lives, and they know it. And so these politicians, like Rashida Tlaib, play to that because they know it sells.
Yeah, but it's almost like now you're at a position where okay, here's a concern or frustration that I have. It's despicable when anybody is innocently killed by anybody. I don't care if you're law enforcement or not. That's a loss of life. It's murder, and that's it. It fundamentally stands against your teachings, whether you view it from a Christian perspective, from a policy perspective of simply following the laws of the United States, and hopefully your own moral code. But the concern that we're seeing is, you see that there are white people that are killed by the police, but you don't see that narrative. You see that there are black people that are killed by the police, and some of the stories are picked up and some of them aren't. The point I want to get to here is, these are the incriminating underlying editorial decisions that are being made by people. And that's what I think is dangerous. You've got entire news outlets that just don't cover stories.
Yeah.
They literally come out and just, well, we're just not going to cover it.
And this goes back to the point I made 2 weeks ago, because at the end, or maybe it was a week ago, it's all blurring now. This is my point. We don't have an actual news media. What we have is a propaganda wing, which is why I think there is an actual argument to be made for a lawsuit of that we've all been defrauded. That there is reason for maybe a class action lawsuit. That there is real harm done, because they present themselves as news and they clearly are not. They are a propaganda wing. Well, guess what? You don't get to lie to someone about your product in a free market economy. You can't. We have a lot of laws protecting the media in this country, but no one's willing to test it and say, hold up, you claim to be this, but here is the preponderance of evidence that you are actively manipulating the information, meaning you are not actually a news media. You are not a news source. You are a propaganda. You are an advertisement. You are many, many things, but you are not actual objective news, nor do you purport to be. Again, right now, Veritas is in the middle of a lawsuit against, I want to say it's the New York Times, and their defense was, well, no one could say that our reporting was anything other than non-verifiable opinion editorials, and even the judge was like, hold up. But you put it in the news section. You made it as you presented this information as if this was objective fact, or at least trying to be objective news reporting, and you're telling us it's an opinion. You don't get to play that game. So it is happening. But what we need to do is make larger cases for this and show real harm. Again, I would ask, this is a question I've asked several people. I've never gotten a response. I said, what do you think would happen if tomorrow every news media, if every time a black man shot a white man, the headline read, white man shot by black assailant. And we made every single case a national news story. How do you think that would go over? I've never heard anyone actually, they always want to change the subject. Why? Because they know they understand what's being said there. They understand how actively the news media is manipulating our understanding of the world around us. You can't right now go take your cell phone out, although don't stop listening to us. Take your cell phone, go somewhere else, but type in white man shot by police. Find a headline that says that unarmed white man shot by police. We know it happens to the tune of twice as often as an unarmed black man being shot. So find the headline. You will not find that headline. You'll often find connections to black individuals who've been shot by cops. You will not find a white person. You have to dig through the stories to find it, but you won't find that headline. Why? Because they know they don't want it. None of this is about news. It's about manipulating. This is, in fact, let me take one step further. It's not just about manipulating the flow of information. That is what it's about. This is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about the fifth generational warfare. It's information warfare. This is a giant psyop. In fact, let's ask the question. What if the real problem is that we actually have a larger societal issue with policing, but the reason it is only the situations with black men that are called out is because they actually want the conflict, so that we don't actually come to that understanding of, hey, you know what? We do have some problems and we can fix them. Here's how we fix them. Because the problem is fixing it would actually decrease the power of the government.
So for me, again, the underlying factor that drives here is not race. It's because I agree with you. I think that we as a country, again, we were raised in a generation that viewed it as the post-racial generation, right? Like that these were not things that we were governed by. They were respected, they were appreciated, they were acknowledged, but they weren't the sole defining factor. And the reason I feel that that's in danger of changing is because I think again, I don't want to give credibility to the argument that because it's on, MSNBC, well, that's clearly what 50% of Americans think. But what I would say is it's being portrayed as though it's an overwhelming majority. You can't watch shows on Amazon Prime or Apple TV or Netflix or Hulu or any that doesn't, outright have claims against conservatism. I mean, you can feel it. It's written into the script. So I don't want to give it too much credit there, because even though I think they're pushing these agendas, I don't think it's reflective of what people feel. But what I will say is this. Victor Davis Hanson put out a story, and it talked about these elements that he saw in this radical attempt to take over American culture. And some of them stood out to me. Not all of them. Not all of them resonated with me, but there were a couple that actually did kind of stand out to me. And I wanted to discuss that in the lightning round, because I've said many times before, and this used to be something that you could like endorse yourself with, to say, I don't care about someone's race. I accept it. I acknowledge it. I embrace who they are fully, but I don't define them by it solely, because that is racism. So one of the things that he talks about in his piece is the concept of racialism. And it talks about how racialism is now acceptable. That in essence, we're defined first by our ethnic and religious backgrounds, and only secondarily by anything that makes us uniquely and unified through our American identity as citizens of this country. And I think that that's such a shame, because that unifying I don't believe you could overtake the United States in a kinetic force. I believe you'd have to have the United States, like Rome, deteriorate internally. And you do that by creating what we were warned about in the Federalist Papers by people like Madison and Monroe and people like that said, stay away from factions. If you factionalize the country, you start to get that. Because when you start making the other guy the enemy, you have to destroy them. You have to destroy what they stand for. Now, one thing I've actually appreciated is that people like Rashida Tlaib literally come out and their craziness is outside. Their inside voice becomes their outside voice. There's no boundary there. And there's no boundary because they don't see the concept of there being rational maintenance of law and adherence to any type of standard or perceived notion of identity other than that of what, ironically, you can't control. I can't control not having blue eyes, or having blue eyes, excuse me. I can't control being any taller or shorter or blonde hair, blue hair, or green hair. I mean, yes, you can dye it. You know what I mean. The point that I'm getting at is it's the things you can't control, the things that take out the content of your character. I'm never going to stop with that because that's the foundation with which I view this. That's the lens. Anyone who wants to look at our show can look over as many episodes as they want and see how long I will continue to draw from that and have drawn from the fact that it is the content of our character. Very wise man said that. And it's only a matter of time, I think, before people have said that they're going to try to go after him. But this concept of racism is this.
Oh, they are. That's not even a question. They are. That's
this concept
of no way for it.
Well, it gets in the way of their narrative. Don't tell me that my skin doesn't matter. My skin is all that matters. You see it in shows now, and it feels forced. It doesn't seem, when you watch shows now, it's like, okay, there's your prototypical white guy. There's your minority of XYZ descent. There's your representative of the LGBTQ community. There's your representative of someone who's talking. It's like they're marionettes, and they're just being masked, but they're still being in control of the same thing. It's still the same perspectives driving it. So let me not dig too deep in this. Again, some of the things that stood out to me. Racialism is now acceptable. And in fact, by many, it's the preferred environment. Or by those, some, it's the preferred environment. The second one that really spoke to me was not just the concept of virtue signaling, because that's more of an action, but the concept of how we look at something like wokeness as a religion that carries with it almost more of a fanaticism, thankfully, than that of Christianity. The concept that you've got someone like, if you're a wokester, you're one of the priests or clergy. And if you're one of the Silicon Valley types, I mean, you may as well just be the new Vatican or the deliverer of the new gospels. We're here to tell you what's right because you just don't know, but we do. And I think that this concept that comes together with these ideologies and then are fueled or supported by the concept that laws now seem to not necessarily be binding. They seem to be applied off of the two other points that I just made. The racial perspective and the optics of what it's going to look through wokeism. I can't stand using the word woke. It's grammatically, all of it bothers me. But the concept that I'm getting at is you've now created this trifecta of this insidious carcinogenic disease in mentality. That law is based off of what I feel, and what I feel is based off of not what I think or the conduct of my character, but who you see me as. So law has to submit to the altar of wokeism, and wokeism has to check itself off of your race. So, I mean, as a white guy who's a straight middle class guy, I have no chance, according to the wokesters out there. All I can do to share my opinion is either get in alignment with what they think or be silenced, and be grateful that I'm silenced and perpetuate my own silence. And I'm gonna pick this one point as a kid from the 90s, and I'm going to put it out there, and I'm going to leave it there. And I'm going to say this. The best example to me where I see someone who unfortunately personifies the embodiment of this action, literally to the T, is the way Hank Azaria has gone about apologizing for being the character Apu in The Simpsons. For those of us that remember The Simpsons and grew up watching that show and thought of Apu and this character and how he was represented, he was a guy that was represented by being close to his family and working hard. And yes, they had jokes about stuff. Oh my gosh. Okay, the Quickie Mart. Got it. Minority families own businesses, and sometimes they own convenience stores. Okay, cool. Got it. Do I think it's the racial segregation of American minds? No. I think wokeism is. I think saying that cops are the enemy, because here's the part about wokeism that falls apart and the racial argument that falls apart. All for this line of purity is, guess what? The minute you're a black police officer and you share that you have conservative values, you're not kind of sort of black anymore.
Oh, it goes beyond that.
And that to me is the most racist thing you can do.
If you want to see racism,
black, white, green, Hispanic, gay, straight, poor, I don't care. But the minute your identity can be taken away by someone because and by the way, it cannot be taken away, but that they try to take it away because what you think is different. You've got representatives in Minnesota. You've got city managers that are saying the police officer deserves due process. And the mayor comes out in defiance against that because they have to virtue signal what they think because they're a politician and they know what the pulse is. That's disgusting. It makes me want to vomit uncontrollably.
Well, that's the thing is, if you want to see real racism, go to any Twitter feed or go to the Twitter feed or Facebook feed of any black conservative. And here's the thing: you'll see not just the most obvious racism you've ever seen in your life, but it begs the question.
No, forget opposite. I don't care about that. I'm talking about black people being attacked by white or other black people because they share a view about something that's considered a conservative value, whatever you want to call it, right? That's disgusting.
But that's the point, because it's not one bit of this is actually about racial. It's about race. It is about
Power.
Controlling a narrative. This is the race is simply the fig leaf. Race has nothing really to do with any of this. This is about control. This is really about control. It's about creating a narrative to keep entire populations of people under control. It's about maintaining power for people who have power right now. That's all this is about. This has nothing at all to actually do with race. And you know how you know that? Just simply, again, what we just said. Go look at how, not by white liberals, black liberals, look at how black conservatives are treated. You want to promote all black voices. You want to hear all female voices, unless those female or black voices say something that the liberals don't like. And suddenly they're not black anymore. Suddenly they're not female anymore. That right there should tell you everything you need to know. None of this, not one bit of it, has anything actually to do with solving problems about race. Are there issues to be resolved? Literally no one says no. Not one human being says no. We would like to actually fix some of these things. The problem is the people who claim to want to fix them actually don't want it fixed, because it's how they maintain their power. You think Al Sharpton longs for the day when there's racial harmony? Absolutely not. He would be broke the next day.
Right, but the concern is that you've got representatives in government. I'm talking about some mayors, elected officials who are designed to uphold those standards, and I'm not talking about standards like, casual Thursdays. I'm talking about the Constitution of the United States. The 14th Amendment to the Constitution simply states the concept of due process. And you've got people that are legitimately standing in the way of that and are firing people because the pendulum has got to come swinging back the other way sometime. And I think it will. But it's a shame to watch this happen. It is a shame to watch this happen. And the people that I feel the most sorry for are those who I think could be making inroads in their communities and working hard. And instead we're listening to people, or not listening in the sense of literally listening, but I mean being projected upon by people such as Ocasio-Cortez or anybody else who wants to speak, Representative Ocasio-Cortez, who wants to speak about this from the perspective, having produced virtually nothing in Congress, preventing tens of thousands of jobs from coming to New York, and doing what? What has changed for her people's district? What has gotten better?
Oh, do you honestly think that she was put in there to make things better?
I honestly can tell you I have no idea why she was put in there. Other than she ran against a Democrat who ran the worst campaign ever because he never went back to his community, and she capitalized on a time that had a heat. But look, eventually, when this doesn't pay for bills anymore, because over time things have a decayed value. So when the racial ideology, when the leader of Black Lives Movement decides to stop buying $1.6 million worth of property, as any good Marxist would, it'll. We've said so long before. You've got to get to the point that wokeism and the racial bigotry being posed against those who have a different opinion will start to be brought into focus when the wokesters go after themselves. Now you're seeing other chapters of Black Lives Matter pull against this woman who did this, who went out and spent millions of dollars on property, kind of pilfering from the top to do whatever they needed to do, or however they did. I'm not gonna presume that. I'm gonna say that from the reporting I'm seeing, it appears as though she went on a buying spree while trying to make the suffering of these other people a priority. It's a shame. And other Black Lives Matter chapters are expressing their concern and disappointment with this. But what I'm getting at is, for those who want to really make a difference and think about things differently, they're being squashed and being told, well, you're not Black if you're doing it, or you're not Hispanic, or you're not, you know what I mean? I mean, it's like the assumptions that people are making based off of people's race and reducing it to that. I mean, think about how ignorant this whole concept would be if we made the same determinations based off people's height. And yet people would say, well, you have no control over your height.
Well, there is such a thing as tall privilege. I mean, there you go. You got tall. You can reach the cookies without a step stool, and for that, sir, you don't understand how privileged you are.
Well, I just feel that at the end of the day, it's something that seems to be incredibly lacking, that we want to reduce people to something that they have no control over, and then make it the fundamental negotiating point for things like policy. It's a distraction.
Well, if you actually, so again, I would argue the real problem here is that you actually want to get things done. That's the problem. Again, I go back to my earlier statement. None of this have anything to do with actually solving the problem of racism. It has everything to do with creating a world in which they have power. This is only about destroying the system as it currently exists. That's all this is about. That you asked what the end goal is. The end goal is a Marxist reality. That's what Rashida Tlaib wants. That's what AOC wants. That's what all these people want. That's ultimately what the people over at Alphabet want. That's what people at YouTube want. They actually do want this Marxist reality because they think they can make it work. They think if you just control enough, it'll work. What they're trying to do right now, the end result of this is chaos. It is destruction. Because when people will not rule themselves, then they must be ruled. The entire point here is for them to create so much chaos and damage and destruction to the system that it can't stand. So this is my plan. If you live in Kenosha, if you live in these places where your politicians are letting this happen, if they're talking about defunding the police, you get out. Just leave. Just get out. It's not worth it anymore. There's no fight there. Your community put those people in place. It's time to leave. If you're a cop, it's time to go find a job somewhere else. Unfortunately, we as conservatives have spent too much time trying to prop up failed states. Let Chicago, let LA, let Portland, let all these places, let New York, let all these places, they're going to have riots, they're going to have these things, let them burn. Just stop defending them. Stop defending them. Stop protecting the people who get, because ultimately at the end of the day, you get the government you voted for. We can sit here and say, look at how terrible the politicians are being. Guess what? The people in that community voted those people in. End of story. They voted them in. They are getting what they deserve. And this is not well, you can't say they deserve it. Yes, you can, because they voted it in. They voted for these people. They knew who they were. That's your community. It's your responsibility. If you don't want these people behaving this way, you shouldn't have voted them in.
But they're not voting for people. They're voting for feelings.
Too bad. I'm sorry. There's a certain point where we have to look at people and say, maybe the real problem here is that we've been propping them up. We have been protecting these people. We've been trying to keep things from collapsing. Let's let these places collapse. Get out. Leave Detroit. Leave Pittsburgh. Get out. Get out of these cities. If that's what the politicians are going to do, it's time to get your businesses, get your families, get out. Come to Texas, vote Republican. Go to Florida, vote Republican. Move to places where this crap isn't put up with. And yeah, a lot of it was put up with in Dallas, but it's also not put up as much. I don't live in Dallas anymore. A lot of people are getting out of Dallas. Go to a suburb. Go to a rural location. Go where you know that you can A, defend yourself, and B, if you're a police officer, go find some place where you know you're not going to be left out to hang. Because if you're in a city of more than, I'd say 500,000 people, I don't know that I'd be looking real hard, because I don't know that I'd trust anyone in that city council. If they're talking about defunding police, if they're talking this way, you need to bail because you're going to be left out hung to dry. Again, let's go back to the first woman that we talked about. She should be put up for manslaughter. It's obvious that it was manslaughter because she on the tape, you can tell she did not expect that to be a gun. Then when she pulled the trigger, she expected it to be a taser. Now, Chauvin, on the other hand, again, there is room for debate over whether or not he handled it properly. But it sure as the world wasn't murder 2 or even murder 3. At best, any reasonable person could argue would be manslaughter. And yet, he was hung out to dry. Why? Because it was convenient for the politicians for him to be hung out to dry. The other police officers, they're going to be hung out to dry as well. If you are in one of these major cities, they do. Please understand, your city does not have your back. Not the politicians, not the people in your squad house. You are on your own. Get the hell out of that place. Let them burn. And if you have to wait, because I get it, you can't always just pick up and leave. In the interim, don't do proactive policing. You do responsive policing. You keep your butt off the floor as long as possible until you can get out of there. These cities, the people who genuinely believe this crap, the people who believe this identitarianism, the people who believe that the cops should go away, the people who believe in this, let them live there. Let them have that experiment. Please get out. Stop trying to keep these people from killing each other because that's all they want. Let them go. Then we can pick up the pieces. Sometimes you have to break a leg to repair it. Sometimes if you break your leg too badly, you break your arm too badly, the doctors will re-break it to put it back together. This is where we are. As conservatives, we've spent all of our time, all of our resources trying to prop up a system that is faltering because we have not properly fought the people who are trying to destroy it. There is a point where you got to you rip out the old wood that the termites have eaten and you replace it. At this point, if you live in one of these major cities and this is the crap that's going on, get out. Just get out. Let them succumb to their own folly. And then maybe we can actually people will be in an area or a mindset to actually have a real responsible conversation about fixing problems. None of these politicians, none of these people in the media have any intention of fixing problems. And that's the real shame of all of this, is that the American people want these problems fixed and they're willing to have the difficult conversation, but the politicians don't want it fixed. The people in the media, they don't want it fixed. Do you think right now, I mean, honest, hand on the Bible, hand to God, do you honestly think that people like Rashida Tlaib, that people like Nancy Pelosi, AOC, do you think any of these people actually want success and prosperity in minority communities, or do you think they'd be worried that without dead black children that they would lose power? Because I look at what they do, I look at the things they champion, and I can't imagine for a second them actually wanting black prosperity. I think they want to keep people and minorities in these lesser privileged areas under. They want to keep them under control. They want the problem. They sure as hell don't want them to succeed. They don't want better schools. They don't want safer neighborhoods for these people. They need poverty. They need crime, or they don't get voted in. They've made an entire career out of promising things they know they can't deliver in ways they know they can't deliver. Every single one of them. And I don't think for a second, you will never convince me that any of these politicians actually care about these people they're claiming to represent.
Well, I mean, I think taking your very impassioned perspective on not just certain representatives' perspectives or the ideology behind it, but I think that another thing to consider. Let's take that focus in the lightning round here and shift to other two topics that I think we can provide the same amount of review here. So two things I want to talk to. Firstly, smaller, kind of a thematic point, and then I'll bring up the story that's breaking that I want to tie it into. The concept of the Biden administration using literally everything in the world, from bridges and highways to sparkle ponies and chocolate chip cookie recipes being infrastructure, is something that, again, they're not thinking down the road that someone else could then take and be like, okay, cool. Well, $300 billion worth of jet fighters is infrastructure. That thought of what we can do. And the reason I say that is it's that concept of take the power that you can, take as much as you can, go through and ram your agenda through. So the next thing that's popping right now is Biden's talking about introducing legislation. It says right here, breaking, Democrats introducing legislation to pack Supreme Court with 4 new justices. So this is a topic that is so wildly unpopular, and I don't think that it has a chance of going anywhere, because you'd need a constitutional amendment, I believe. Well, Cruz was trying to get one to cap it at 9. But the way that they're trying to push for this, they're coming at this, and here's the real, I don't want to be cynical about it, but here's the perspective that I can see it from. And that is, they're coming at it from the perspective that they're going to be in power forever. Because if they really thought that the Republicans stood a chance to stop any of this, you have to wonder why they're doing it. They're either entirely doing it to appease their base, or they think they can actually do something. So they either can't get something done, but they want to gesture like they can, or they think they actually can get something done. So you've got people like, again, going back to the infrastructure side, how much can you cram through? So people like Ted Lieu, Elizabeth Warren, and I mean, I'm talking about people that are way there. And Ted Lieu, it breaks my heart, because he was a decorated military officer, and it really, really upsets me to see how he just dropped off the edge. But Elizabeth Warren and other people there that are in a, I mean, and that in itself to me is the great irony. I mean, you talk about the greatest cultural appropriation in history, and it's just frustrating. But anyway, the point that I'm getting at is that now they're talking about they want to drop amnesty for illegal aliens into the infrastructure bill.
Oh, of course they do.
Now they want to create it as well. Well, it's human infrastructure. It's all about a work. We have left reality, and so now it's, well, let's cram everything through. So again, they either believe they can't do anything and they're going to do it just to show their base, or they actually genuinely think that they can do something here.
So here's the thing:
break the system on all these things. Because I just don't see how you do it. I don't see how they're possibly going to get away with 4 new justices. Because they're going to want to pack it with, and they're going to want to put it through reconciliation, so they only need 51 votes. But I mean, how are you?
So here's the thing. I think they can get away with it. And the problem is, if they do get away with it, then they know that they will always have power. That's the point. They're doing this in order to have power that can never be undone. That's why they want to put these things through. They know that this is their one opportunity to just completely. And some things that people may not know. It's called there's a strategy by these 2 people, Cloward and Pivens, their last names. It was a married couple. The basic premise of the Cloward and Pivens strategy is to overwhelm if you overwhelm a system, it will collapse, right? So let's say you have a welfare system. Well, let's say that welfare system can safely handle 10 million people. Well, if 40 million people show up, then guess what? The system is going to collapse under its own weight, and it's there that you can remake it in your will. It's a Marxist strategy. Cloward and Piven were Marxists. That's what this is. It is trying to break the system so completely that you have to that they can take power and put in their Marxist ideology. They're totalitarian. And let's even, I'll even get away from Marxist. It's an authoritarian doctrine. They want a strong centralized government that controls and sees all things. I think that it's not true Marxism, because they do see the need for some of these businesses. But the point is, they want big business, because big business will partner with them and do what they want. Again, as we've said before, Google, which is technically Alphabet, but Google, Amazon, Facebook. So these are companies that have more power than any empire on the face of the planet. They have more wealth and more power to change the world than any empire that has ever existed in the planet. Since humans showed up on the scene, this is it. This is the most powerful empire that's ever existed. And it's not the United States. It's 4 or 5 corporations, because they're all in and on it together. They're all colluding with one another. That's what this is. And this is the problem. This is the fight we have to have. If the problem is if these people get what they want, there is no we no longer have the United States of America. It is complete totalitarianism. It is authoritarianism, and I think they. And the problem is, I know for a fact they think they can get away with it. The question is, can they get away with it? The problem is, I don't know that they can't. There's nothing. Again, I'm in a better mood from a couple weeks ago, only because I think I can see now how we fight. We've discussed this, and we'll keep discussing it because I think there's a way to win. The problem is, it's a win that wins 30, 40 years down the line because we were foolish and we didn't do the work 20 years ago. So we're paying for it. The problem is,
what would that work have been?
What
would that work have been?
Actually arguing. So here's the problem. We haven't made good, solid arguments. We were not wise with the arguments that we made. And instead of pushing back, we kept hearing, is this the hill you want to die on? Right. And so everyone's like, no, we gotta live to fight another day. This is, it's just this one thing. It's just this one thing. The problem is every hill is a hill to die on if you're liberal or if you're a leftist. So the problem is they died on the hills and they took them. The problem is what we need to do was 40 years ago. We needed to have not given away the education system 100 years ago. This has been a long-standing problem. And again, making credible arguments beyond, well, because I said so. The problem is the conservative side has long too often appealed to the intellect and not to the emotions. Again, just as one of the way an argument should be made is, I am, let's say, for capitalism. Why are you capitalists? Well, my answer would be to a leftist, because it's the most effective means of redistributing wealth that has ever been discovered by man. Leftists appeal to emotion. Now, the problem is conservatives, those on the right, tend to appeal to the thought, to the mind. Well, the problem is the heart and the mind don't always talk the same language. You have to make the emotional appeal, and then you can make the logical appeal. The problem is the left has been able to make the emotional appeal the entire time, and they've had enough power within the media to not to just support this idea of this emotionalism and not actually have to back it up. And so they got the power that they did. We needed to have fought this a lot better 40 years ago. We didn't fight it 40 years ago. We didn't get involved in activism the way that the liberals did 40 years ago. So now here we are. That's how we get a Rashida Tlaib who can stand up and say something as patently, obviously, ridiculously stupid as let's get rid of cops, and not have her be laughed off stage. The reason she can have power is because we did not get involved when we needed to. We did not make the right arguments. Now, the question goes back. Now, again, I go back to your point. Do they think they can win this? Absolutely, they think they can win, which is why they're going to do everything right now. This isn't incrementalism. It's let's do everything right now. Well, actually, hold on. Before I leave the idea of how do we fight better 40 years ago, what we needed to do was actually go for people who were going to do the job instead of people who looked like they were going to do the job and simply said they were going to do the job. One of the big things with Trump that a lot of these ever Trumpers screaming about was, well, but he's not a good Christian man. Well, you know what? Maybe that's been the problem. We've been electing people who claim they were good Christian people, and they didn't do anything. They didn't get the job done because they didn't have the spine. They prayed real pretty. Their hair was all neat. They knew how to look like $1 million when they were carrying that very expensive Bible into the church. They knew how to get their speechwriters to quote the Bible. But did they actually do anything? Did they do the hard work of actually making the country better? No. They wanted to maintain power. The problem is we did not really vet the people that we were electing. We were electing people who wanted the power. I'm not saying that they weren't necessarily quote unquote Christian, but I do know that they didn't do the job they were sent to do, and that's the problem. We were betrayed by our own vanity, I think, on the right.
Well, I find it hard to believe that they're going to try to. I mean, these two things. Okay, so the infrastructure bill. You start packing with all this garbage, it's not going to make sense. It's just not. And as much as they want to pass it through reconciliation, I think you're going to get some major pushback from people. Does it go through? The other thing that the Victor Davis Hanson article was talking about is the concept that money is no longer tied to any form of value anymore, and the concept of it is just completely surreal. We just don't have any understanding of that at all. And you're talking about a $30 trillion deficit, 110% of GDP. Like, what are you going to do? Right. We've talked about this before. This isn't like the old, oh, your grandchildren's grandchildren's grandchildren. That's gone. That doesn't even exist anymore. You know, there aren't enough generations that we can count up to get to where this is balanced out. Because I don't think it's designed to be balanced out. I think we've turned the entire planet into a credit card, and we're basically going to find ways to make monthly payments. And rather than pay off, you know,
that actually sounds really sounds really optimistic to me.
Well, I mean, I had a friend once. He got together with a couple of his buddies when he was younger. You know, he was teenager, early 20s, and he's like, "Oh, we all wanted to get an Xbox for our new house that we were renting. It was going to be great." And all the guys, and so we got the store brand credit card and we put it on there. And the $299 Xbox ended up being $753 by the time they paid it off, or whatever that price was. 2 years later, the company was perfectly happy to do that because they made 300% profit, but the understanding of what money could be was just, and again, think about it. When you look at the priest that I like to follow a lot, and I've mentioned this on the show before, is a very wise man on YouTube that I've enjoyed following. He talks about the concept of, when we have an inventory that we take, are we spending our money, which can be considered a voice in a certain way, our endorsement, our opinion? Are we doing it in a way that's reflective of the values that we try to strive for? Are we spending $300 a month at Starbucks? Do we have 5 different television show platforms? Did we eat out 14 times in a month? Are we making decisions with our wallet that undermine our perspective? So the whole point I'm trying to get at is when you look at this, when you figure out what it is, what's going on, we've gotten away from the concept of understanding basic fundamental existences, like the concept of money. And not money, but paying what you owe, being responsible with your foundation, rather than just, well, the government will bail us out because they'll put us all on the dole of the government, and then we're here to go, and now we're good to go. Forget COVID as a sickness, as a virus. COVID was a virus to the planet and to the systems in place because it started to fill people's minds with the idea that it's okay to live off the government. And I don't mean people that take advantage of the government. I mean the concept that government is who you lived off of. I don't think they're going to be able to push all this infrastructure, cramming the courts, all this stuff. I don't see that happening. Infrastructure may make its way through in tricky ways to do X, Y, and Z. I don't see the court packing thing because I don't know where they come up with justifying doing all of it. And who are you going to push through on these committees? You've got no vote in the Senate. It has to come down to the vice president.
And that does not please the pup and fluff.
And the puppy face totally agrees.
Yeah, she's not happy about that.
No, but I mean, and it's the same thing. Are you on some of these gun legislations? Do you really think you're going to carry people like that? Again, you're not going to blow up the filibuster. I have been amazed at the transparency. I'll give them credit at this. The transparency with which people have just come out and openly said, here are all the crazy things we're thinking. They've said it.
Yeah. They said it. They said it loud.
Better to think the world you a fool. Better to keep your mouth shut and think the world you a fool than open your mouth and remove all doubt. They've legitimate.
But okay, so
all of our crazy ideas.
Let me push back. But who says that they think the world's going to think they're crazy? That's the real problem here. Is that I think there is a significant portion of the population that's like, well, okay, that sounds about right to me.
I don't think it's a significant portion. I think it's just a very loud portion that gives the appeal, gives the effect that there's a lot. I don't believe that.
Again, significant does not mean majority. I agree that they're just louder, but the problem is there's enough, and there is enough. At the end of the day, I'm going to say it this way. The problem with the election is not anything. Is not any of the weirdness that went on. It was the fact that they only needed to get they only needed the weirdness to get an extra 20 million. The real problem is that there was at least 60 who were willing to volunteer for it, for this guy, who were actually willing to vote for him legally. It was
Yeah, but how many people were just again? They're not read into most of the stuff. They're not
but
following
that
this.
okay. I'm
They're
sorry.
voting against. They're voting
I'm sorry,
against
Nick,
Trump.
but who cares? I'm sorry, Nick, but I'm going to push back. That's still the problem. The fact that that is still a problem. You're right. I don't think most of them knew what they were voting for. I think they were manipulated by the media. It's irrelevant. It's still the truth is that they couldn't figure it out. That's still the problem. They still see everything that we see. They just don't care. That is still the problem. We can't just. That's the problem. Is they still agreed to this. They still hear all the stuff that we hear, and they're still voting for it. They may think that this stuff is crazy, but they're still voting for it. That's the problem, and that's the larger percentage of this nation. Again, 20% on one side, 20% on the other side. It's the 60% in the middle that everyone's fighting over. Guess what? A big chunk of that 60% doesn't seem to care. They don't care. That's the problem. We have to win them over, but we can't win them over because they don't listen. They're too lazy to care. And unfortunately, we're not gonna become Starship Troopers and start making military service the primary way that people get the right to vote. Right? We're not going to change that. Everyone's trying to find ways to make voting easier and to open more people up to voting. So the problem is we got 60 million people. A large chunk of that 60 million people are not smart enough to actually understand what's happening in the world around us. They don't want to put in the work. That's the problem. That's what we're up against. And that is why these radical authoritarians think they can get away with this, is because they know those people are too stupid to pay attention or care. As long as they got HBO Max, as long as they got Netflix, and as long as Cheetos are $3 a bag, they're happy. That's who the real fight is. That's where the fight's got to be. That's why I'm saying we got to get people at this point. We may want to look at reconsolidating people on the right into certain locations. Maybe this is time to. We got to let the people who have this leftist ideology. Their systems need to collapse. But how do we fix Washington? I don't know that we can fix it right now. I think that maybe 20 years down the road. This is going to take. We need to start suing them. We need to start making these large, sweeping, very painful financial lawsuits that makes lying in the media, that makes this control that the Democrats have in the media, that makes that a bad idea. Well, maybe we do need to start boycotting. Maybe that needs to be the thing. We all got to pull our money in. Let's take our money out of places and put them into different things. Let's actually hurt people financially so we can start propping up the truth.
Well, and again, we can make a choice. We can be proactive, but it doesn't have to be something we're trying to strike against anyone. We're just trying to hold true to our values. When these companies come out with these guidances and these policies that we disagree with, then you can decide not to patron them anymore. I have no interest anymore in any type of professional sports. I have no interest in following it. I have no interest in patroning it. I have no interest in it. When I see certain airlines, I'm the son of a flight attendant. When I see airlines that are making decisions to go and do stuff, fine, cool, do what you got to do, man. Take care. There are other airlines. Thank you, capitalism. But something to pay attention to that we're seeing is that with the new swearing in, there was a new representative who took over the seat from her husband. If you may recall, the gentleman, the representative passed due to the representative's name is Luke Letlow, and he was out of Louisiana, and his family suffered the loss of his death at only 41 years old. So his wife ran in the runoff, and she won. So with that, her being seated now, we are now looking at a difference now of only 3 votes. Now it's 218 to 212, meaning 6. But again, that just means you need 3 to flip. And so, you could see what it is, or 4. And I think the Democrats or the Republicans are in a good place to take back the House. But we've got to keep that on and keep doing it. I think in the Senate, again, I think they're going to try to cram as many things through as they can. I just don't see the court packing thing from a psychological standpoint. I think what you do is you try to put up 3 or 4 things and say, well, we didn't get all of them, but we got the big ones. The ones that need to be stopped, and I mean the ones that just can, infrastructure needs to happen. The version that they're drafting now is just a cartoon. I agree with infrastructure. I wish Trump would have gotten infrastructure done. But what I'm getting at is, I think that what we need to do now is we can rectify, hopefully, in some imaginary world, to get this done, that it comes out that it's not a complete dumpster fire. Okay. Ones that need to be stopped are things like HR1, with the manner with which it just undermines election integrity. And it's so funny because I think you're right. I think the left has so entirely captured the narrative through the use of the media to make it sound as though Georgia, they walked the campus of Georgetown, a very good school, my father's alma mater, in fact, which he used to be very, very proud of. But it's in a position where they walked on the campus with the kids and started asking them all the questions in a jaywalking manner. Oh, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? And they all endorsed everything. And they're like, cool. You know, this is the Georgia bill, right? And they, all of them, like, not, I give them credit in this. They were like, oh, okay, well, okay, I would support that, because they just needed to be informed. But what they bite onto are the talking points. And we're all guilty of doing things like that. I certainly am. But I think in the end, it's what we need to fight for is the truth. And the truth is, if we don't hold true to the standards that exist, I think the left, as I've said many times before, the left is driven by result. They don't care what happens to the institutions, standards, the history, the heritage along the way, because they're not worried about that. Because I don't think that overall that they're concerned with the concept of time or legacy. They're concerned about effect. They're concerned about present status. I'm not saying all leftists are anything. I don't like grouping people together. I think that's limiting. I will say the correlation between people that I've met that tend to be agnostic or atheist tend to overwhelmingly present themselves on the left side. And when you don't have the concept of going to someplace after this place becomes what you have to make your utopia. So you're willing to do anything for that. And government can become God. When you possess a different perspective, that God is God, government is a tool or an instrument, your perspective is different. So I think that, to your previous point, I'll end on this. I don't want to give up the faith and the hope in my fellow countrymen. However, I find it just as important to remain true to the virtues and values that I was raised with and those that I believe to be true, and I will exercise those through my discretionary income, through things that I patron, and through organizations that I endorse. Furthermore, I think that by engaging our community and keeping them highly informed and engaged is a tremendously challenging tactic. But it's the one that in the end serves the best for the most. It just involves a lot of work, and that's falling on us. And if we truly care about our country, then that's what we need to do, in my opinion.
All right. Next week we'll come up with a nice list of products to ban and to boycott, and let's start figuring out how to start burning things. Maybe that's our problem, right? Is the leftists have been real good about getting what they want by burning things. Let's figure out what we need to burn maybe next week. We should have that conversation.
Outside of places like that with people that come that don't want to be, like these horrible signs you see sometimes that are just really graphic or violent. Could you imagine seeing most people out there protesting on the other side, on the like highly conservative side, that things like heck, instead of heck, say, heck no, we won't go, ... unless it's for the welfare of my countrymen. In which case, call me. Look, we're not going to take any ground to turn against our countrymen. Our countrymen are our countrymen. We have to lead back to the city the shining city on the hill. We have to get back there.
Okay, hold on. Let me push back on this a little bit, because what's the oath? We will fight. We will fight against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I think we need to realize not all of our countrymen are our countrymen. They are. They are domestic.
We don't need to demonize. I don't want to lend my heart or my energy or my efforts towards anyone's downfall or destruction. Rather, I want to dedicate my efforts, energy, and intention towards raising up those that I endorse, support, believe in. And yes, I would love for that to be every single human that I meet. However, I realize that there are those who are going to disagree with me, and I have to focus on the principles that I hold dear and those things like life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and to go after them relentlessly, but to do it in a manner with which I can look at myself in the eye. I am happy to withdraw my funds from things. I have no intention of patroning certain companies. I don't. I have absolutely no intention of drinking Coca-Cola or flying Delta. None. But
Well, then
I
there you go.
or watching Major League Baseball, or paying money for any of the streaming services that are just flagrantly anti-conservative.
Yeah. No, and this is what it's what it's gonna take. And that's what we need to do. We need to
But
start
I don't
coming up
want
with.
to take on the cost of sacrificing the love that I have for my country and those who I still want to keep faith in with regard to my country.
Well, you don't. Again, you're doing it in order to save your country. We got to figure out. We got to find the alternatives. We got to find the conservatives, and make sure we're spending our money there. We got to vote with our wallets, and we got to figure out ways to make our voices heard. And again, part of this is going to be lawsuits. It's going to be getting maybe quitting your job and running for a position in the civil government. Maybe it's going to end up being things like that, helping to come together to write laws and actually petitioning for them to get passed. I mean, we got to get more active. We got to look at this war, because this is warfare. That's the problem. This isn't the problem. Is we were not. Let's go back to 9/11. What did the 9/11 Commission basically come out and say? The reason 9/11 happened was because the Al Qaeda was on a war footing with us. We weren't on a war footing with them. You asked what should we have done 40 years ago? We needed to have treated the culture war like it was really actually worth fighting. The culture war was never about whether or not you could say Christmas tree. It was about whether or not it was ultimately always going to be about whether or not you got to be a Christian.
Well, what I get driven crazy by is the concept of the word inclusion, because now the word inclusion simply means to be stifled if you don't have the proper language of the zeitgeist or the proper word selection. And I don't mean like charged words. I mean like places you're seeing now that are putting out things like, in the name of inclusion, we are discouraging the use of the word mother and father.
Yeah, mother, father, gender. Yeah, exactly. My favorite is Latinx. I know it's Latinx, but no.
Well, no,
Latinx
but I mean like, but I mean like, I mean, guess what? If Latin people want to change up and use ideology or use identities in their culture that they feel is important to them, then you know who has every right and authority to do that? Latin people. You know who doesn't need to direct that? CNN. I like what Branchelas wrote, and it's something that you've stated to before. And knowing the two of you, it's interesting because I can see where you share this ideology, and it's very important. The concept of bread and circuses, right, and that of Caesar, keep the distraction through the masses. Well, the distraction of bread and circuses these days is no longer the floor of the Senate, I'm sorry, the floor of the Coliseum. It's cable news. That's where the bread and circuses is. I mean, you want the best example? Under Donald Trump, we spent 4 years where every single time the man sneezed, we thought it was a constitutional crisis, the rising of the Fourth Reich, or the end of the universe due to nuclear holocaust. Now we have a president that legitimately, I think, just turned the border has turned the border into a humanitarian crisis, a national security crisis, a health crisis, a criminal crisis, whatever you want to call it. And we want to talk about the fact that his dog bit somebody and he likes ice cream. So whether it's the inflammation or the suppression, the media has proved that it is nothing more than a tool to be used in its own guidelines with no oversight, none. And you've even seen stories coming out where CNN and guys have talked openly about being manipulated, that their concept was dedicated to the destruction of the previous administration and the institutions that sustain that. I mean, that's what I'm saying. I don't even like to click on websites like those, except that you wanna keep an open mind and read things and be engaged from as many perspectives and as much input so you can make an informed and rational decision. But it's hard, I'm not gonna lie. And you finally started to see some things start to adjust that. Cuomo's show tanked, 45% drop off in ratings, where Greg Gutfeld's show just skyrocketed. So maybe there are people out there that are going to do that. But as we end tonight, I always want to make sure that we're sending with something not just positive, but that has a focused intention and a positive intention. And that is, I don't feel that I'm boycotting and banning. I'm just making informed decisions as to where I'm going to put my money. And I think that that's just being responsible.
Okay, then let's look at it this way. Uh, let's create a list of patriotic, pro liberty countries, so that are companies that we can spend our money with those pro liberty companies.
Yeah, no, I fully support. I'm not a big fan of lists just because I think that time history can be the best teacher. And this is not me pushing back and trying to be argumentative. I'm simply saying I trust our listeners. I trust ourselves to make those decisions as to what we feel is there. Now, we can talk about informing people or endorsing things that we feel are good, organizations that we think are important, that we think are out there. Sure, I support that. But I do
And you
think
know what? Let's give a little bit of homework then. Let's give a little homework for everyone. Let's find a local business, right? That's a replacement for, say, Coca-Cola, or let's start looking for constitutional attorneys who we think could start taking up lawsuits. Let's not reach out to them yet, but let's start finding these people. Let's start doing the hard work of asking the question: where do we need to go? How do we make this happen? Because we got to do it, and why not us? Why not us? Why not the people watching right now, listening? Why not? Why aren't you the person who's going to save this country by placing one? Maybe it's going to take 100 different lawsuits against all these companies, maybe 1,000, but you could be one of them. It
well,
is
if not now, when? If not us, who?
exactly. So everyone, y'all have got homework.
That's our
Maybe you need to look at your local government and see where you need to be. Maybe it's not you. Maybe it's someone you know. Maybe someone we're listening to right now who needs to run for government. We don't know, but let's all find that in our own lives, in our own locations, and over time we can build a true a true resistance that returns us to a nation that we can be proud of, a nation that will protect liberty, a nation that abhors tyranny, a nation that our children will actually get to grow up in, because right now it doesn't look like that's going to be the case. Nick, it's been great as always. We will see you next week, as well as everyone else. And before we leave, let's say howdy to everyone who's in the chat today. We've got Lamp of Light. We've got okay, Nick, you're gonna have to pronounce that. Is it Brian Tulis or
Nope,
Brian Tulis?
I think the way I see it is, when you think about the spider, a tarantula, it's a Briantula.
See, that's what I was thinking too.
Yeah.
Susan Robertson, Cheese Freak Ginger Snap, Mr. D Knuckle, and Susan Robertson. Okay, that's everyone who's in
all
chat.
those we don't see that are out there, and all of you that share it. We've been growing the channel. Hey, it's slow, it's organic, it's a process. We're not going the advertising route yet. We're going the small, just put it out there. So if you guys want to bring people along or share people, that'd be great. We appreciate everything that you guys have done for us, and we look forward to having a chance to share our thoughts. And we appreciate you guys checking in. And again, we come from the place of loving the principles, the people, the country, look, no one says our country's perfect, but I think we're trying our best to give everyone the best chance possible to succeed for themselves in that pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness.
Absolutely. All right. Nick, we'll see you later. Everyone in chat, everyone who's listening on replay, let's make this week a good one.
Everybody take care.